new chorus book tonight. Number 1. We'll start with number 1 tonight first. Servant's Heart. Then 99, which is a new one to learn, which is called Walk Worthy. We'll see if we can learn it together. Sing it again? Okay, let's do it again. Here we go. Suzanne, or one more? Let's see. Let's go back to 24 and try that one. This is a new one too. I think it was, you're looking at 24. Yeah, you are always good. Let's see if we can sing this. Could be. Could be. All right. We're going to pray and take an offering tonight. And, okay. Stan, how about praying for the offering tonight? Good tonight? Good. All right. So take your Bibles, turn to Genesis 13 tonight. Genesis 13. Remember now last week that Abraham told a half truth, half lie. Okay. And Sarah was his half sister, and he got himself in a real bind because all of a sudden Sarah now is with Pharaoh, and how's he going to get out of that? And he has, of course, the only way he gets out is for God to deliver him. And I believe that has, again, a tremendous effect on him as he goes back. Again, that this has taken place. And again, as I said last week, all these experiences through these chapters right now in the life of Abraham are going to show these different events, how his faith is being grown and stretched, and of course not only do you have that going on, but you have God's promise that he has for what he wants to do with Israel and his promises and so forth. That's all intertwined here as well. So in verse 1, we see right away, so Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Now, did Abram have any choice about that? About leaving Egypt? No, he didn't, did he? Okay. Pharaoh said, I don't want to see you. Get out of my sight, basically, after what took place there. And he left with wealth, though, from Egypt. Remember that? Verse 2 says this. He says, now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. So he's rich. And it says, and so he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there we have again, Abram says he called upon the name of the Lord. So he goes back there to worship again the Lord. If you look back in 12, I believe it's verse 8. This is what he's referring back to. It says, from there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent at Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So again, you have this pattern. Again, Abram worshiping the Lord, going from place to place. Now, just to say this up front too, remember again, Moses is the one who God used to write down, we believe, the Pentateuch. And the first people receiving this are the people of Israel that have come out from Egypt. So we're going to make a lot of comparisons here to some of their experiences. Now, when Abraham, he had this experience with Pharaoh, he has to leave Egypt. In that case, he comes out and he's blessed with more wealth. All right. Now, think ahead now to the time of Moses, the Exodus, and let's turn then to Exodus 11, 1 through 3. Now remember what takes place we go through this whole series of 10 plagues. You come to the worst of the plagues at the end. Notice again what happens in this situation. And I could just ask this question. When Israel had to leave Egypt, or they wanted out, because Pharaoh now says, get out, even though God has to bring them to that point, because they're so fearful as to what takes place here, do the Israelites go out with wealth from the Egyptians? They do. So that's really what I want to read here about. Notice, and the Lord sets this up for them. In chapter 11, the Lord said to Moses, yet one plague more I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. Speak now in the hearing of the people that they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor for silver and gold jewelry. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. Now, let's turn over to chapter 12, verses 29 here through 36. This is the account of it actually taking place. In Exodus 12:29, at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, up, go, out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel, and go, serve the Lord, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And then we read in verse 33, the Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls being bound up, and their cloaks on their shoulders. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have what they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. So we have the same kind of a situation. So here you've got Abram's descendants basically having a very similar experience later that Abram had, okay, just to let you see that. And I find that these connections very similar. And first of all right, so now we'll go back to Genesis 13. We'll pick it up again here. And again, Abram is back to this place, again, to worship God. Now again, for us to get into it, we have to just think about what his worship may have been at this point. Glad to be back out of Egypt, glad to have been delivered from God, by God from Pharaoh. And so I'm sure it was a special time, and it says he went there, and he went there especially to call on the Lord again, okay, for the Lord's direction and all this. Okay, now, but it's not long after this is all taking place, he gets back in the land, he worships the Lord, and not long after this, he's got another challenge. Because of all the wealth that him and his nephew have between the two of them. So here we have another situation right away. So how's Abram going to respond now? Verse 5, and Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And so it tells us there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Okay, so we've talked about some of the promises that were made to Abraham. We know that a big part of the promise was going to be land, eventually. But God's going to start getting specific with that with Abram. But what I want you to see is when this comes up, you've got this problem. And so how is Abram going to deal with this situation? Okay? Now there's contention, there's strife between them. That word for strife is used in other contexts as well. Strife between, I think it's Abimelech and I think it's Isaac at one point, over the wells. It's the same Hebrew word that's used later when the Israelites are murmuring and upset about not being cared for. But they've got a problem. They've got these two both have too much wealth. Now, interesting too, note that how they speak of wealth. They don't speak in terms of land. They speak in terms of what? Their livestock. Okay? How much they have. Turn to Job. Job 1. Now remember, Job lived back in this time. Job 1. Would someone like to read the first 3 verses of Job 1? Kaylee? Okay, so again, how do we know that Job was greatly blessed? What are the things that it describes to him here? Children. Okay, children. All right. Okay, children. There you go. Children, right? That's a blessing, right? And what else? Servants. Lots of servants. Okay. And what else? Livestock, right? 3 things, right? Okay, now what does Abraham have that makes him so wealthy? Have those 3 things. He has lots of servants, and he has lots of livestock, and he has lots of kids. No, he doesn't have lots of kids, does he? Okay. So again, those 3 factors, okay, blessed of God. Children, lots of livestock, right? And livestock, and what was the other one? Servants, yeah. And we know, we'll find out here in just a moment, when he has to, in the next chapter, when he has to rescue Lot, he's got a lot of servants that goes with him. I don't know if it's 300 and some or what. He's got a lot of servants. So he's got lots of servants. He's got lots of livestock, but he doesn't have children. That seems to be the one factor that will keep popping up here when you start looking at his wealth and so on, what he has and how he's been blessed of God. And that's one thing he really does need is children for God's promises to be fulfilled. All right? So, again, this is how they would describe not so much by land at this point, although we see that it takes land. For what reason? Why do you need land? For the herds, right? You need it for grazing. You need it for your livestock. So there's been a problem here. There's too much livestock and not enough grazing land. Now there's something else here going on too. At the end of verse 7, also that tells us why there's a little bit of shortage of maybe some land at this point for them to graze. Who else do they have to be concerned about? The people that live there, yeah, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, okay? All the ites, right? We'll see in different passages, all the ites. Watch out for the ites, right? Okay. And so you got the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and the Perizzites are just one of the tribes that live there as part of the Canaanites. And later, we'll see some more difficulties that Jacob and his sons also have with. In fact, let's look at one. Look at Genesis 34:30. Genesis 34:30. Later we'll deal with this in more detail, but look at Genesis 34, 30. And this is the context where an evil man, we would say, defiles Dinah, and the brothers, Jacob's sons, are not very happy with this. And you remember that they'll set this up in a way in which will bring about a real problem here. But if someone like to read 34 verse 30. Derek? Okay. Now, interesting, the kind of reputation that Abram had with the Pharaoh of Egypt, the kind of reputation that Jacob, after what his sons end up doing. Now, what did they do here? Remember what they did here? Their daughter was raped, right? They took revenge. And how did they, how many people were guilty of this evil deed? One, okay? And what was their justice? They wiped out what? Basically a city. Okay, that's quite the revenge, okay? Yeah. And so here you have, and again, I just wanted you to see that also it mentions who they were dealing, the people in the area again were the Canaanites and the Perizzites, okay? So God has put his blessing on Abraham, his descendants, and so forth, but their actions and people along the way, they're not always, you might say, the best either. So all the failures and all the things that take place, and God is going to bring about his purposes, and he's going to have to be dealing with these people and so on. Just to and make that. So there's a strife. We'll go back to Genesis 13. There's a strife, and you think about it, Abram and Lot. And Abram will get together with Lot now, we'll see, to work this out, because he doesn't want strife. Who would you expect to be the one that should have first dibs on the land? Abram, right? Why? He's the senior. He's the senior. Huh? He got the call. He's the one that's supposed to get the land, right? Now, to try to give you an indication of maybe some of the effect that his experience in Egypt had and God delivering him and how his faith might be growing is how he will respond in this situation, okay? And we need to see these kind of little things, little clues that there's, because he knows he's supposed to get land. He knows he's supposed to be blessed of God. He is the senior. And yet notice how he handles this. Verse 8 says, Then Abram said to Lot, Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. I don't want problems. What are one of the 7 things that God hates there in Proverbs chapter 6? The last one, huh? Well, that's one of them, is pride. Let's go there. I'll give it. Let's go back to that. Proverbs 6. And that's one of them, haughty eyes. That's going to be one of them. Would someone like to read again, 16 through 19? We'll see what God hates here. What does God hate? Paul, I'll read it.
There are 6 things that the Lord hates. 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make
So what does God think about discord among brothers? Now, you don't want to be one who causes it, right? And David also David talks about when brothers are getting along and that kind of unity, it's like, he uses a description, it's like something flowing down the beard, remember? Oil flowing down the beard, something like that, just the pleasant, that's how he experiences that, right, Luke? Yeah, it's putting that nice, whatever, I don't know. I think about look at people with beards here, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's, so Abram wants peace with his relatives. He doesn't want to, he would rather have peace in this situation and not worry about the land. And he's willing to let Lot have first choice. Okay? And why I say that speaks, again, maybe to increasing faith is he's going to leave that to God. Okay? God's made the promise to him, some things, okay, he's going to get. So he's going to let Lot make a choice first. So verse 9 says, is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left. And so what does Lot do? And it says, and Lot lifted up his eyes. He saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered, everywhere like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, there's that little note there. Okay? So, if you're a wise person and you're going to observe, you're going to check out the land and where you want to go, and so Lot does that. He looks and he takes into consideration and he sees it's good land, fertile land, good for grazing, water. Water is an important thing. Got all that, right? So he decides to go there. But then there's this little note that it's before the time that the Lord destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. So we need to think about this a little bit tonight about, again, making decisions, because would you think Lot made a good choice?
Yeah.
As far as he went, right? As far as he did, right? Yeah. He observed from as far as he went. He observed. Good land, good water, best place for it, right? It's interesting, though, where we know where this is going to go, right? Now let's take a practical illustration. Let's just think about this a minute. If you were going to have to move someplace and take a job, and maybe you had an option of 2 or 3 different places to go, and they all had great benefits, they all had a good place to live, would there be any other considerations that you might have to make besides just it's a good job and you're going to be provided for well and you got a good house and that all looks good? Would there be any other factors in your life that might determine whether you would want to go live in that area or not? What?
Okay,
So what? Yeah.
what kind of schools have they got?
What kind of schools? Okay.
Infrastructure, they good places to shop and
Yeah.
so on, and housing cheap,
Sure.
taxes.
Sure.
Um,
You're missing something.
Church.
Church.
I was gonna get that.
You're gonna get there. Yeah, you might want to scope out and see of those areas, is there a solid church that you would be able to go to with your family, right? Okay. So it's like, yeah. I think when we're looking at these things, we need to start thinking a little bit more. Yeah. I got Hannah, you got a question there? No? Yeah. Missions, yeah. There is some of that. Right. We don't at this point. I can give you a clue from the New Testament. He said he had a righteous heart that was vexed. I could give you the benefit of the doubt there. Okay. But I think we need to look a little bit more at that kind of, and making your decisions. It's like there are other factors there too. And even if you're going to want to reach people, you would still have to take into consideration how you would provide for your family in that situation. Okay, even Michael and Nancy go on the mission field. There's dangers there, but there's things that they made sure, the homeschooling, there's just sort of different things. They first found a good church over there too that could help them get established and find things out too. So, in their process of doing all this, so yeah, there's other things there. He would do just like we normally think, though. He lifted up his eyes, he looks, he checks it all out, but then there's that little statement that it's really great right now, the land, but that's not even going to last. There's that little statement there made, okay? They had to say it also because for the people who are reading this, it wasn't in such a great shape when they read this. It was before the time when God brought the judgment, right? That as well. So that's informing them, okay? Because they might look at that and say, that was such a good land right now, that area. Yeah, Paul?
But Lot didn't know that. And once he discovered how wicked those places were, he could have avoided them too.
He could have. He could have. And that's what we're going to start finding out, though, is what does he do? Yeah. That's what, yes, we'll go, if we read on further, but just to make you think about that. Now, yes, 13. Yeah, well, we got to read just a little before that, too. Okay. It already had a reputation, didn't it? Yeah, it already did, didn't it? So verse 12 says, Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley, and he moved his tent as far as Sodom. Probably shouldn't have moved so close to Sodom in the case of what will take place. But they do have a reputation, as Judy said in verse 13. Now the men of Sodom, and it uses two Hebrew terms to describe just how evil they are. Okay? They're wicked and they're great sinners, right? They're wicked and they're great sinners, all right? And they're great sinners against who? Against the Lord. It's in the Lord's face, okay? Okay, that's stressed as well. They're great sinners before the Lord. So, now, in contrast, verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes, Abram, and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, eastward, westward, for all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. First of all, he says, just as far as you can see, God's going to bless Abram. And it was worth Abram trusting the Lord in that. And what I wanted to say by all that was, what caused Abram to be so generous to do that? It's like, was, and to be able to trust God in such a way that, you ever notice how when you learn to trust God, how freeing it is that you can let go of things? You can give, you can do the magnanimous, the generous thing. You can do those kind of things and leave things to God. Yeah, Paul?
That's all true.
Yeah.
He also was being a good leader. He wanted his people to have a good place to live. But he also wanted to cultivate peace, not strife between him and Lot.
Sure, he wants peace.
It's a real good way to do it, too.
He does want peace, that's for sure. Peace is more important than that. Have that strife. That's right. it looks like he's going to get an awful lot of land, at least in the future. Now, how much land did Abram really ever get? He basically wandered most of his life. In fact, you go over to Hebrews, it talks about many things that he always had to trust that his descendants would get what God promised. Okay? You ever think about the kind of impact you're making right now in the church or in the country about what you're going to leave for your kids and your grandkids? Okay? I was just reading my Bible reading this morning about Hezekiah. And it bothers me, like, God gives him an extra 15 years of life. And he shows all his stuff to Babylon. And then when Isaiah says to him, well, all this stuff is going to be taken and your kid, it's all going to happen. And basically he says, well, good, I accept it because it's not my time. And I go, I'm not sure if that's what it's trying to say in Scripture, but it's the wrong approach. It's like, well, that's bad too. That's not good, But at least he wasn't going to have to experience it. And I think it's good for us to consider what we are leaving to our kids and our grandkids. Now, we try to maintain and keep righteousness and freedom in our country, but even if that doesn't happen, we have to be preparing our kids and grandkids for whatever comes as well, to trust God in whatever the situation is. But we should want to live in such a way that we're not selfish and say, well, I'll be out of here before it gets bad. And just let it go. You see what the difference there? Okay? We got to think about how we're thinking about things. Because you think about our country, I'll just go back to this. Think about the people who've gone before us, who have allowed us to have what we have right now. We just passed D-Day, for example. Those kind of things, yeah. You think, well, other people have given their lives so that we can enjoy what we enjoy. Okay? You said, Paul, Abram's a leader. He wants peace. He is selfless in this decision. He trusts God, his faith. God promises him all this land as far as he can see in every direction, right? And then he says this to him in verse 16. So far, he's got a lot of animals. We're going to find out in the next chapter he has lots of servants, right? And they also promise him yet something. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one could count the dust of the earth, your offspring also could be counted. Now, if you're Abram hearing those words, as he walks off to check out the land, what do you think he thinks about that promise from God?
Must be a figure of speech.
A figure of speech. Yeah. I want us to see that Abram was a real man, and because we're going to come, he's going to rescue Lot, and this is all being set up because by the time we get to 15, the big question that's on Abram's mind is my servant the one? Who is going to give me kids? When am I getting kids? I don't have kids, yet I promised God to have all these kids. So this is always in the background here, okay? And it's like that's the tension that's always there, which puts it in a position where only God can do the miraculous and can do what's needed for his promises to be fulfilled. It all depends on God. It all depends on God. Okay? So the promises he's made to you, you have to think. Again, we've been going on Wednesday night. Remember, what's the first letter again? God is Almighty, right? And the second one, he is the Almighty blessing giver. Okay? The Almighty blessing giver. And when he promises you something, what might seem sometimes even impossible in your life. You'll come to a crisis, a trial, something, and you say, I see no way through this. And what is God doing for you at that point? When you come to, and doesn't look like there's any way through it, what has God done to you? He doesn't really care for you that much, so he's giving you a rough time. He loves just, no, that's not what's going on, is it? What's going on? Huh? Yes, good, Jeanette. He's making us look to him. He straightens out our priorities, doesn't he? Isn't it too bad that he has to bring trials in our life to straighten out our priorities? But he does. He does those kind of things because he cares about us. What really matters, right? What really matters? And so those things happen for those reasons. And we have to trust him. And we don't understand sometimes. But he's doing those things and again, I believe for our good. The verse there in Romans 8, for all things do work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose, right? He's making us Christ-like, the next verse. So, he promises, Abram, I'm going to make your offspring as great as the dust of the earth. That's a lot of descendants. A lot of descendants. Now, 17, he says then, arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built again an altar to the Lord. And so as it started tonight, and as it ends, what's going on in Abraham's life? Again, he goes back to a place of worship. Notice where he puts his tent. Notice where notice where Lot put his tent. Lot. Okay? There's reasons these are put there. They're giving us little clues as well. And this is not a mistake for the way God put these statements in here. Okay? So, Lot ends up setting his tent there next to Sodom, as far as Sodom. And Abraham now again is putting his tent in a place where he can worship God and has an altar for God. And that's where Lot's going to get in trouble, okay? Because we're going to see, and this is the reality. We do know from the rest of the text where Lot's going to go, okay? And Lot's going to end up being right in the city. And it's not going to have a good effect on his kids. We're going to find that out as well in this case, okay? Anyway. Any questions? When you study an Old Testament text, narrative kind of things, one of the things you look for is repetition. One of the things you look for phrases. You see how they're being contrasted phrases with the individuals. There's just various little clues along the way that you have to look at to say, now, what is God trying to communicate here in this case? Okay. Anyway. All right. And Abraham's going to be quite. We'll see next time. Abraham's going to be quite again the person who's concerned. You see this concern for his nephew. You're going to see this very clearly as well. I mean, he really does care. Okay. Any prayer requests tonight? What? Jolia. Yeah, Jolia. And Edna's shoulder yet, right? You said tomorrow? Okay. Okay, Edna's shoulder tomorrow. Okay, and Jolia yet, yeah. All right. Anything else tonight? I hope we just learned that, you know, this the reason God deals so much with trust and faith is I think we have a problem with it. we have a problem with it. life is not easy for us from our perspective. All right. Anything else? Well, let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for your word. Lord, help us to be careful with the word, but Lord, again, may we learn the positive things here. Abram, Lord, he put his trust in you. He believed you, and he accepted the promises, and and so on. And yet, even then, he continued to grow in his faith, and you tested him. And as we watch his life, I pray that you'll encourage us, and the Lord will see that you always do keep your promises, and in your ways and in your time, and you bring the best to us over the long time, and we sometimes can't see that process and what you're doing in our hearts and lives and the good that you're bringing there, but again, bring that into our lives. I pray for, again, Peter this coming Friday will have this dental surgery. Be with him, and we just pray Edna will get some answers tomorrow as she goes to the doctor, again, for her shoulder, that she can get, again, the relief that she needs there. Jolia as well, Lord, that she can make progress yet and feel well. And Lord, that also that you'll give us opportunities, Lord, to reach people who need you. Lord, maybe we'll be looking for those opportunities. Lord, maybe we'll be put in a position. Maybe we'll be asking you, Lord, give us opportunities. Help us to be aware, Lord, of those around us, loved ones, neighbors, others that we come in contact with, that we're not just thinking about ourselves, but we're really thinking about their souls and their eternal destiny. And Lord, that we would have your wisdom to speak truth. And then we pray. Amen.